Let's take a look at what's been happening. Following this for us is our US correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. And Sherwin, we took it live when the UN chief, Antonio Guterres, said that the fighting must stop. Then we heard that impassioned speech from the UN ambassador from the Ukraine, but followed by these incredible claims from Russia, also about violence, both sides talking about Nazification. Just tell us what's been heard tonight.
Yeah, as you correctly pointed out earlier, Francis, we're in an information war right now, and it's not just about the weapons and the boots on the ground. It's certainly the propaganda, as we call it, from either side, and what to believe, right? How do we thread this needle? We learned that so acutely in our coverage of the COVID-19 pandemic, the big debate about vaccines and so forth, and that perhaps informs us about how rigorous our role as journalists needs to be in terms of, sifting through what is real and what is not. You correctly point out that the call certainly from the President of the General Assembly that talked about the violation of the UN Charter and how unacceptable this is, or the Secretary General himself talking about the escalating violence which is resulting in deaths, civilian deaths, including children, being totally unacceptable. Enough is enough, said Antonio Guterres in that meeting. Soldiers need to move back to their barracks. And it's that kind of disposition from the UN Secretary General that has led him to find a real opposition from Moscow, from Sergei Lavrov, from President Putin, the Russian ambassador Vasily Nebenzia, saying that the Secretary General has been speaking outside of his mandate. So there's that battle of ideas also going on here at the United Nations. But in addition to that is, of course, a new process that is underway, right? The Russians vetoed a Security Council resolution that condemned its actions, called for Ukraine's sovereignty to be respected, for their troops to be withdrawn. That resolution was vetoed in the Council on Friday night. It is a similar text that is now before the General Assembly. There will be some debate around that text, perhaps some inclusion of greater diplomatic roles for the United Nations, the Secretary General. That process still unfolding here. We're told a lot of lobbying happening from countries, particularly from the European Union, to countries like South Africa. Where will they vote on this draft resolution? That will, in essence, Francis, give us a really good indication of where all countries stand, not just the 15 members in the Security Council, but all membership of the United Nations. Where will they stand? Do they believe Russia is justified in this action or not? And those chips are yet to fall, certainly within the next 24 to 48 hours, Francis.
The text that you're talking about, Sherwin, or anything that comes out of the UN, is symbolic in a sense. Do you agree with me? Because without Russia, without its vote on the Security Council, no action can be taken against itself, of course. So I don't know if you heard the Ukrainian ambassador talking about the criticism against the UN and saying something much bigger is at stake here. This could mean obsolescence for the UN. Are people thinking about that, how the UN will emerge from all of this?
That is a really great question, Francis, because as you well know, there is a long-standing process called the Intergovernmental Negotiations on Security Council Reform, where questions around the use of the veto is being debated, questions around expanding the permanent membership of that council, the fact that Africa does not have permanent representation on a Security Council that is dominated by agenda items from the African continent. So that is a process that has been ongoing, but yet you don't hear many of the officials here talk about how this situation, how the ability of a permanent five-member, a protagonist to a conflict, how that ability then exonerates, protects, firewalls a country from accountability within the council that is responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. It's certainly not a rule that would be afforded to South Africa were it to invade Lesotho, for example, or Swaziland, for example, or Eswatini. The P5 nature of the P5 has really affords countries a great deal of power in terms of the broad consensus that the world seeks to achieve through the Security Council, be it the Western Sahara issue, be it the Palestinian issue. It's not always the same P5 member, but they certainly, this is not unique to Russia. So certainly a broader conversation that needs to happen, probably in the aftermath of this situation, as to how this process can be moved forward much more speedily. Yeah. But let me tell you, that's a heavy lift if you look at how the United Nations has progressed on that issue to date, Francis.
Indeed. So, Sherwin, at home, there's a huge debate going on about how South Africa should respond to this. And DIRCO, the Department of International Relations, spoke quite strongly last week, said we should recognize the sovereignty, Russia should recognize the sovereignty of Ukraine. Apparently, the president was angry about that, saying that's not South African policy. And then the ANC, of course, saying something completely different. What do we expect to hear from South Africa? I don't know if they have spoken yet or will be speaking at the UN tonight.
They haven't spoken yet. There are 107 countries that are enlisted to speak. South Africa is around 64, so they might speak later tonight or probably tomorrow, given how slowly these proceedings unfold. You're correct about the contestation of ideas, certainly within the political realms within South Africa. What I'm hearing from diplomats here is that they want the draft resolution not just to condemn Russia, but also to talk about, how we move forward from this process. They prefer a diplomatic path. They want the Secretary General's good officer's role to be affirmed. They want a negotiated process, right, based on South Africa's experience after apartheid, to really lay out the way forward here. They believe that the talks that are happening, that have just concluded on the Belarusian border between delegations of Ukraine and Russia, is something that needs to be supported and augmented as the only real avenue here in the face of war out of this problem. So South Africa wants a greater emphasis on the diplomatic track. Negotiations, very, very important. That is not yet contained in the draft resolution that I have seen. And so my understanding, lobbying going on certainly within the 193-member body of the United Nations General Assembly before we get to an actual vote on that draft resolution in the days ahead.
Sherwin, very quickly before we let you go, we're going to go live to Europe very shortly and talk about the latest developments. What are you hearing? Apparently, Ukraine not only asking for entry into NATO, but now the EU as well.
Yeah, we're also hearing that they have signed some documentation that would lead to a process of membership to the European Union. But of course, it will take the EU itself to vote, the various 27 member countries of the European Union for that process to unfold. I don't know the details. Probably, best to speak to our European colleagues about that. But yes, I've seen that. Of course, the big issue, Russia's ambassador talking in the General Assembly earlier about how Ukraine joining NATO is a red line for them, and of course that is also an issue that NATO is going to have to grapple with in the years ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Following that UN rare special emergency session for us, SABC's correspondent in New York, Sherwin Bryce-Pease.